And that's always been something of a conflict of interest, perhaps, to be the developer and also the planning authority. Anyway, here they weren't the planning authority, they were the developer alongside British Land, and they came up with a scheme. It just shows them images of the warehouses as they were, providing some wonderful spaces, all sorts of activities going on in them. Their proposal was to basically clear the site. It looks like one of those sort of images from the ghastly 1945 raid of Dresden, with just sort of walls left standing. This is a conservation area, and what they basically wanted to do is fill it with offices. A bit of residential was shown, but actually they changed their minds, and it was all ended up being 100% offices. The Spitalfields Trust came up with an alternative scheme which showed how the old buildings could be kept, extended with roof extensions, a mixture of uses, some social housing, some private housing, businesses, shops, cafes, etc. Tower Hamlets refused the development scheme. They were very keen to see this actually happen, but they were overturned by a different mayor of London at the time, somebody called Boris Johnson, who you've probably heard of, but rather forgotten about now. That he did quite a lot of damage in his time, overriding local authorities. The scheme has been built. Here we see some of the bits of old fabric being propped up, and stuff put on top of them. I mean, it's hardly worth the effort. That building that was supposedly kept and added to is hardly recognisable as an old building. And here we see some of the new stuff. It's all corporate offices, of course. None of the small businesses that were paying low rents in these old warehouses can possibly afford to go back there, because new buildings cost a lot to build and developers need to get their money back, so the rents are high. There's an exodus out of London of small businesses who can only afford small rents, and they're moving up north or places like Norwich or whatever. And good luck to them, but it's London's loss, of course. This is Liverpool Street Station. I'm sure we've read about this. Actually, 2 schemes in now for pretty equally bad, really. This is the first one, Herzog and Moore, great Swiss architects, that they're obviously being offered a big fee here to build something that massively tall straddles the station and the hotel. Huge amount of opposition to it, and there's now a revised scheme, so almost equally bad. Different architects. Huge amount of offices to pay for a few extra escalators and lifts and baby changing facilities within the station concourse. And a completely mad proposal. Incredibly expensive to build this over-station development. So it's so expensive that it barely produces the profit, they say, to do the station improvements. So why on earth do that? Why not do the station improvements, which might cost £50 million, and put a levy on all those towers that the city have approved elsewhere to pay for the station improvements, which they say is necessary to bring in all the workers to work in these new towers. Seems pretty straightforward to me, but developers have got a grip over the city as well, and indeed some of the city councillors and the chair of their policy committee are themselves property developers. The retail sector. There's also pressure here. This is Marks and Spencer's in Oxford Street. I'm sure you know it. Very fine building, not listed, very nice Art Deco building from 1929, and nor in a conservation area. Marks and Spencer's store here hasn't been doing very well. This western bit of Oxford Street near Marble Arch, I think suffered quite a lot during COVID and still isn't doing well. Marks and Spencer's, this is their flagship store. They occupy the whole building. So on the top floor you can even buy beds and stuff like that. I personally didn't know Marks and Spencer's sold that stuff, but they didn't want that anymore. So they put in a scheme to knock it down. Just have a store on the ground floor and basement, selling mainly food, and I guess a few sort of underpants and things on the ground floor. But no more beds. And then 10 stories of offices above. Some images of it. There's a cross-section through it. So basically a huge office development, which is probably the last thing that Oxford Street needs. It could probably do with some, if you were going to pull down the building, it would probably be better to have some people around who are going to be there at the weekends, be there in the evenings, and generally help to regenerate Oxford Street as a community. Similar proposal in Museum Street in Holborn. This not very nice hotel from the 1960s. But a proposal to pull this down, which in itself quite a lot of sort of embodied energy is there in that one. The cost to the planet of getting rid of that structure and putting up this instead. So a taller tower, and this is yet more offices. Does London really need all these offices? Better, I would have thought, if you were going to have a bigger building, to have a bigger hotel. But there's been a lot of uproar here from local residents in Covent Garden who are going to lose their light, etc., etc. There is demand for hotels, hugely in London. A lot of existing hotels being added to. There's one at Knightsbridge. Images of it there of the former Camden offices. Town Hall being extended, 2 stories extra as offices. Hospitals, it seems, need to stay in London. This is Great Ormond Street. Huge proposals to now on site to massively increase the bulk of the building. This is the new building that's being built at the moment, 3 times the height of the building that's there now, overshadowing the buildings opposite. There's various sections through it to impact on the street. And of course, nobody can stand in the way of a hospital. Hospitals are almost sacred things, and whatever the harm might be, they get consent. This scheme also blocks views of St Paul's, but nobody was prepared to say that was a problem. This is Gray's Inn Road, another big hospital building, which again aggravated a lot of the local residents. And it doesn't need to be like this. This is Cambridge, the Cavendish Centre, just on the edge of Cambridge. New development, wonderfully spacious. There's land elsewhere to do all this stuff, and no reason really why Great Ormond Street Hospital couldn't have moved to Cambridge. Outside, there are similar problems. This is Manchester. One particular architect, Ian Simpson, who's very keen on towers, and this is his latest proposal, but I mean, looking at it almost makes you ill, I think. There's something very, very unsettling about this as a way forward. And this is Birmingham. More tower proposals, very, very high densities. And again, it's shown at ground level as absolutely marvellous. A slightly more positive note to end on, reusing existing buildings. This is Smithfield, the London Museum, the old Museum of London. is going to reopen next year, and this is tremendous. So this is a great battle won. These buildings were going to have been demolished, and now they've found a new use. This is another example nearby, Bleeding Heart Yard, of where a rather ugly 60s building has been reclad. Bleeding Heart Yard, there it is. It's rather fun. And another one on Aldersgate Street, repurposed, brought up to standards. And then the Sessions House in Clerkenwell Green, a sort of wonderful building, of course, but it's had a fantastic new boost and a tremendous regeneration, public going in, and it's a really wonderful addition to Clerkenwell. And Clerkenwell Green is still a wonderful place. We should treasure these things. And that is Islington's equivalent, really, of that. That's it. I've finished. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alec. Before we go for questions, I'd like to remind you there are 4 lots of lovely books here. 1980s London, what's this? 20th century buildings in Islington. What's this new city, Alec?
That's about new architecture in the city of London.
Yes, and
there's a
something
book,
on Cuba.
There's a book, 1980s London, which has got a lot about Islington in it.
I'm now going to take questions in 3. Please keep them brief. And we'll start here. The lady with the purple shirt.
Hello. That was a wonderful talk. Could you comment on the Holloway prison development? What are they building?
Arm up, please. Lady there.
Thank you very much. You didn't mention much about energy reduction and generation, sustainable energy and ventilation, which is also another pressure for change. Could you comment on that?
Okay, and one more question from here, this lady here. Can you wait for Can you please wait for the microphone?
I was on Camden Council in the days we built council houses. It was established that medium rise was greater density than high rise. And there's corruption now, not only in building, in the legal system. I'm a barrister, and also the media don't want to know because they are totally corrupt.
Could you just go for your question,
What can we do
please?
about it?
What was your question?
What can we do about it?
Okay, over to you.
Okay, well, Holloway Prison. It's a shame, I think, that the whole of the site was cleared. I went round it when it was empty. I don't know whether any of you took that opportunity. And, of course, it's got a huge sort of baggage of stigma and all that. But a lot of the buildings, I think, could have been retrofitted, repurposed. There was a theatre, a chapel, swimming pool, all sorts of things. I mean, the prisoners' accommodation was great, and so some of it clearly was not fit for repurposing, but quite a lot of it was, I think. What's going up now? I mean, the council has fought its best, I think, to try and maximise the amount of affordable housing. But in an ideal world, it would all have been affordable housing. It's another example of where the private sector, and I include now in the private sector housing associations, we're not getting as much social housing as we should. And that needs, a radical change of heart by government, I think. Local authorities on their own can't do much. Retrofitting, that sort of follows on, doesn't it, from repurposing buildings. It's certainly the case that old stock needs improving in terms of its energy performance. But there's a huge amount of information out there about how you can do it. And the absolute last resort should be to pull something down and put something new up in its place. Because the embodied energy of the materials of what's there at the moment, together with the new materials and the cost of transporting that stuff halfway around the globe, as seems to be the case now, isn't very good. Personally, I'm quite keen on sort of relaxing the planning requirements to enable solar panels and air source heat pumps and all that sort of stuff. I mean, personally, I live in a late 17th century house, and I've had solar panels for 20 years and an air source heat pump for 10 years. And they're great, so I urge everybody to have them, and you get your money back. And in terms of upgrading your windows and putting insulation in your loft and what's up, yeah, you've got to do it. Everybody should get on and do it. And I suppose there need to be perhaps better financial incentives for people to do that if they're not doing it. But yes, it's got to be done. But there are obviously other elephants in the room about, airports and all that sort of stuff in terms of energy and how we use it and travelling around. High rise, yeah. Well, of course, you're absolutely right. In the old days, when Camden and Islington were doing their sort of low-rise schemes, there were people around like Harley Sherlock who showed that you could get as high a density from low-rise as you could from building towers. But that was on the assumption that you needed lots of open space around the towers so that you would get daylighting and lots of play space. Well, what's happening today is the developers are proposing to put towers almost next to each other. And a lot of planners are saying, well, daylight doesn't really matter anymore. You're living in the middle of a city. What do you expect? You expect to get daylight? You must be joking. And it's quite extraordinary how those standards are being abandoned at the moment under this sort of pressure for development.
It's all corruption. We've got to get rid of it.
I don't know whether it's corruption or not, but it's developers wanting to make money and local authorities being poorly resourced. I think that's a lot of it.
Okay, can we have our next lot of 3 questions? Anyone on this side, at the back? This lady in the black top in the second row, please. Margaret, where have you gone?
This lady in black.
This lady in black in the second row, Margaret, here.
Working from home. I was astonished how many new office buildings, huge office buildings are going up, when there was some suggestion that there'd be a lot more working from home post-COVID, and certainly members of our family are working from home 3 days out of 5. So what's happened to that, and can that not sort of feed into the lack to fewer office spaces going up, or is it that the businesses just want everybody on site?
Okay, good question. This gentleman in the blue shirt, third row here, and then.
Can I ask what you think of the government's plans to enormously expand housing? And is it time for a return to a modern version of the Victorian terrace?
Okay, and then Anne Wayman here, please.
If the mayor is claiming that the student accommodation is housing, why does it not then have to conform to the housing regulations?
Okay, working from home. Well, I really think working from home is here to stay. All the young people I know like the flexibility of working from home. and I can't see everybody going back 5 days a week. What businesses are trying to impose is sort of one day at least, or one day a fortnight, where everybody's in the office. But there is, of course, a huge amount of what's called hot desking. So if you were to have everybody in, there's actually not the space to accommodate them. What businesses are saying they need to do to counteract working from home is have more generous space standards in the offices, so that the amount of space per person is bigger, and they want to include gymnasiums and running tracks and all sorts of stuff, so that it's fun to be in the office. But whether these huge glass and steel towers will really do that, I'm not convinced. Because I think there's more to feeling good in the office than just whether you've got a gym or a running track. It's the feel of the street, interactions within the building itself. So I don't know. I mean, it's who knows how it's going to pan out, but it certainly is a different world. And as we all fiddle around with our mobile phones and things, but in 10 years' time, I'm sure there won't be mobile phones. We'll have moved on entirely to something far more sophisticated, where it's, you've got something in your wrist and it's fault transfer or all sorts of stuff that we can't possibly imagine yet. So we're putting these buildings up, which are supposedly going to last 25, 30 years. But, they're going to be out of date, I think, long before that. Moving on to, should we be building Victorian terraces? Well, I think the mansion block scale, perhaps not 2-3 stories, but certainly 5, 6, 7, whatever stories, is a way of getting high density. And there are sites like St Luke's, the Finsbury Leisure Centre site, where that would probably be the right solution rather than putting up a tower, which has been proposed. I think being resisted. And then spreading housing all over the Greenbelt. Well, I think we should be tackling brownfield first. There's plenty of brownfield in London. And if you don't tackle the brownfield, whenever is it going to be tackled? If you just let developers do the easy stuff and build executive houses on the Greenbelt, where everybody, of course, needs a car, which is hardly sustainable. That's not going to solve the problem at all. And of course, private developers will build the easy stuff first. Why shouldn't they, if they're allowed to do so, and make their profits for their shareholders, which are perfectly entitled to do so. What was the... Oh, students. Yes, student standards. Well, I think the mayor isn't thinking well about space standards. I think he's sort of assuming that there are enough, perhaps, young people who will be happy to live in sort of cluster accommodation where they share a kitchen. And that will count towards housing targets. My view is a retrograde step. Of course, the Parker-Morris standards, post-war standards, are long gone, wrongly. But there are still, for sort of normal housing, certain space standards, amounts of outdoor space for family accommodation, minimum room sizes, etc. And to abandon those is catastrophic, I think, for the future.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, this gentleman there, on the third row.
I believe you said earlier that we had something in the region of 450,000 empty properties in London, and that a lot of these are being kept empty intentionally by overseas investors.
Ask your question, please.
Yes, the question is, what would be the opinion of putting an escalator on the empty council tax bands for those properties, so maybe 1.5 one year and 2 another, and so forth, in order to encourage people to either rent them out or sell them? Thank you.
I have a question. Is there any hope of giving fresh ground rules for developers and constraining some of their more disastrous plans to build tower blocks? Surely we can alter the law to make developers behave better. Okay, that's the second question. One more? Jane.
Okay, fascinating talk, thank you. Just wanted to know, why are they all have glass in the building? It seems to me that's going to be really hot like that they can't open. Is that good or not? I don't know how it works, I'm interested to know how it works. Is it possible for tower blocks to have not just office but also accommodation so that these people don't have to commute? That's probably one of the big problems why they don't want to come into town, or that hour-long commuting. I've forgotten.
That's a good question. That's good. Okay.
All right, probably enough to remember. Okay, empty properties and council tax. I mean, that's a thing for government to get to grips with. There's been talk about that, well, except in Wales, taxing second homes. And that's probably quite a good idea in Wales, where they are just second homes. I'm not sure that the oligarchs are going to worry about an extra 50% on their council tax. I'm not persuaded that they're going to be priced out of anything, really. So it's probably a good idea just in order to increase the revenue to councils, because they need all the money they can get. So, yeah, I mean, I'd treble it, probably, including in Wales, because there's a housing crisis everywhere in the United Kingdom, it seems to me, not just in London. More constraints over developers. Well, I think this government, all the talk is about deregulation, not more regulation. Streamlining the planning process is all we hear about. It's the absolute opposite of what one wants. What one really wants, I think, are actually more planning officers in planning departments everywhere. The poor people here in Islington, there are just not enough of them. They're firefighting the whole time. They barely get a moment to think. It's depressing. I'm sort of glad I'm not doing it anymore. But that's really at the root of the problem, I think. There are regulations. Councils do have policies. Islington has got a tall buildings policies. It says quite clearly the archway is not a place to build towers. It's identified a few areas where towers could be built, like around Ford Street roundabout, whatever. And those policies just have to be adhered to. So that's really all I can suggest on that. And in terms of glass, well, yeah, I think glass is, we talk about solar gain and stuff. It's not great. It's easy to construct these buildings though, because they're all prefabricated, and you can knock these towers up pretty quickly. Glass is an easy material to use, but there are some architects who are now really kicking against that and wanting more masonry, but that's more expensive.
Thank you, Alan. I think we can draw the formal part of this to a close, but come up and look at these books and have a chat with Alan before he disappears. Thank you very much for a really sobering talk, and I'm glad you ended on a hopeful note, but it wasn't very hopeful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.